Well, she'll probably be coming. We'll give her like a couple more minutes because Andrew, this crew does the best demos I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Like
No pressure.
short and concise and like filled with brilliant information and like they'll I don't want to like say this in case they're not going to do it this way today, but every time so far it's been like one person will navigate while the other person talks like perfectly so well that you wouldn't even know two people were doing it. Like
Wow.
so buttoned up. And so
Absolutely.
thinking we're gonna spend a couple more minutes waiting for Leanne.
That's good stalling though, Stacy. Good job.
How's everybody else doing?
I got to go on a walk with my.
I'm glad air quality is returning because we could use something good. You know, just
Oh my God.
one little tiny thing. It's been particularly terrible as of late. And I'm so glad to see you all. So thank you for coming. Another sad thing that crumbles my little heart is that this is coming to an end very rapidly. And I am distraught. I can't. But it's been beautiful to see PRs coming in with like a beautified app that looks stunning and makes me swoon. It's beautiful. So, okay, I will turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's so yeah, I'm surprised Leanne is not here. I think she posted a comment on the PR like 10 minutes ago. So
there is.
so I just sent her a message. Oh, is she here?
Yep.
Oh, there she is. Yes.
Sorry, I was having technical problems. I was like, oh crap.
You're fine. You're fine. So yeah, so there were two equally super interesting tickets to work on this week, right? One was more like a design perspective, and there was like opportunities for maybe some grounds for the application, like the first CSS deeper work, I guess, and the other one was more about building a new view from scratch, which is equally exciting, at least for me. So we have Fabrice and Leanne on one side, and on the other side we have Leah and Mabel. So who wants to kick in? Kick in? Yeah. Start? Kick off, I guess.
We can go first if you want to, Fabrice.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so if you want to share your screen.
Yeah.
All right, so there's not that much functionality, like new functionality to it, but this is what it looks like now. So if you remember what it looked like before with the white page and everything, now we have this. So we called it Orange You Glad You Made a List, because I love a good pun. And we got the background image from Unsplash, if I remember the website's name. And you can see, since we also have a token, or we don't have a token anymore, you can see how at the bottom it has that pop-up message still. So, and it's also, so if we go to the code, so that's basically it. It's nothing too fancy. So first in app, we got some fonts and colors. And the way we got the colors is I posted about it on the PR, but there's a Chrome extension called Colorzilla, which allows you to pick colors on your browser. And so we figured out the theme first, then we decided on the background image of oranges. And so we figured out what oranges we wanted, and then we picked those colors from that background image. And so we have a light orange and a dark orange, a light green and a dark green as our main 4 colors, basically. And then for the body, we decided to use grid to center everything. I feel like that just makes things a lot easier. I'm still learning about grid, so there might be some things there. So that's what we did there. And then if we go to Welcome CSS, so this is where we did most of the stuff. So we used REMS because, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm still learning this, but REMS are based on your font size. And so like 1 rem equals, and the default font size for most browsers is 16 pixels. I remember correctly. So one rem is 16, two would be like 32, et cetera, et cetera. And the reason we did rem is because you don't have to do media queries basically to mobile design. So it's really nice. It helps a lot. So if you decide to look at this in a mobile view, you'll see it still looks pretty much the same. So that's why we decided on REMs. And so we also have different font weights just for the sizing of the fonts. And then if we scroll down just a little to that button, we did a linear gradient on line 29. And if you also hover over the buttons, you'll see that it changes to a pointer and there's a box shadow that happens. So it's just a visual cue like, oh, you can click this basically. Yeah. And so that's basically all we did. Any questions?
This looks so beautiful. I love everything
so cool.
Flash has.
Yeah.
And so this image is great. And I love how you chose the colors that way. I posted a lot of this in the PR, but like I was curious about like, oh, how did you get the colors? Did you get them from the image or did you get the colors and then find the image? And I also loved that you like have that little commented code block of like all your colors. And I posted like, oh, this is great. It's like a little mini style guide that you could like pop out and put in a reading and have like create like a really beautiful style guide that like will help people kind of follow it. And it'll come in handy next week when you're all kind of styling together to take all those colors that you have and make them into like constants so that throughout the whole project, instead of having to like put the hex code everywhere, you can just write light green or whatever.
Yeah, like a variable.
Yeah, and like share it around like that'll just keep it a little more consistent, make things easier to use. But this is beautiful. Thank you, and thank you for teaching us something during your demo. Absolutely incredible demo.
I had a quick question. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Scott.
Oh, I was curious about on the H2 for the, you made a list.
Yeah.
I saw the margin top is -2 rem. What is that -2 doing?
So if we didn't have that, there's a margin, there's a big space in between. So we decided we didn't like how that looked visually. We wanted to be a little closer. So that's just what it does. It gets rid of that spacing in between.
Interesting.
Did you see the comment that I put there about the semantic HTML in issues? What did you think about that?
So I left a comment. Sorry, it's very last minute. Would we just put it in an H1 and then the part that we want to style differently in a span, or would that be in a div?
So a span is going to be inline. So if you wanted those to like sit next to each other, you could put it in a span. If you want it to go like flow below it naturally, then you would use a div because it's a block.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, so we'll just make it. Yeah, we can fix that. Make it a div.
Cool.
Yeah, we just had it as a H1, H2.
Yeah, and it would kind of like it could make sense as an H2 if that's what you were intending to do. So can you share your screen again? So I'll just show everybody so that everybody can know what I'm talking about. So basically is the name of the app just Orange You Glad, and then the tagline is like you made a list, or is the whole name of the app Orange You Glad you made a list?
I kind of think of it kind of like, this is going to sound like Orange You Glad, parentheses, you made a list. So like, I don't know, like
I like you're leaving room for future products, right? Like Orange You Glad, other things too.
Yeah,
have a whole franchise.
So right now, Orange You Glad is an H1 and you made a list is an H2. What I would do is, because the H1 makes sense because that's like the heading of the whole page. Aren't you glad? Aren't you glad? But you made a list. To me, it doesn't flow much as an H2 because it's not really heading anything. If anything, if that were not going to be part of the H1, I would say that would be just like a paragraph tag or something that adds like a little bit of extra context. Because when a screen reader is going through, like those headings become kind of significant for navigating the page. And so a screen reader user might be like, just think of that as like another heading for something. It's like, what is this a heading?
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. So
They,
anyway,
they
perfect.
both could be part of the same H1, but
Yeah.
have different styling applied to them. Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I think they're gonna end up going for. Is just
But
And
just be
also,
careful. What you can't. It's not legal to nest a div inside of an H1. So yeah. So you would probably want to use a span just to apply the style.
A span or like a paragraph or something.
It's not legal to put a paragraph inside an H1 either.
Okay, but you're saying you're saying still nest another element inside the H1 and make that whole thing.
Yeah, because I think, like as a header, Orange You Glad You Made a List is kind of the name of the app. So for a screen reader user, like having that be one unit probably makes the most sense.
I didn't know it was illegal to put a div inside of an H1, but you can do like an inline span or something. That's interesting.
I mean, I wonder, it's probably valid HTML, but it probably is not good practice, right?
No, it's invalid HTML.
It's actually invalid HTML. Wow.
Yeah.
Is it valid?
Love it.
Yeah. If you use a span and then give the span CSS of block display block, does that?
Yeah, I was thinking that I didn't say that because I wasn't sure. But I think that like the HTML is parsed separately, and the styles are just applied later. So I think that probably still is legal.
Yeah, I can't see why it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
The screen reader wouldn't know anything about that.
Yeah, like even an HTML validator wouldn't know what styles you're applying, right? So
I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
Great work, team. Good teamwork.
Yeah.
Also good news. OrangeYouGlad.com is available for $9 a year. So that's, should buy. Should totally connected to the app. And also, please, Leanne, don't sell yourself short. I know you started by saying like, oh, we didn't write much code or something like that, and it's not about the quantity. It's not about the quantity, and you've obviously spent a lot of time brainstorming and making it right. And so it's not about how many lines of code you produce. It's about the thought and also the process and the result. So don't worry about that.
Amazing work.
Yeah. All right, and next we have Mabel and Leah, who created a whole new view for us.
Oh,
I know, right?
Okay, so as a user, I would like to get more information about the items that are on my list. And so if I go ahead and click on detail, I see this nice view with the item that I clicked on and additional information such as the last purchase date and how many times I have purchased this item. And then when I'm ready to go back to the old view, I can just click on this nice arrow and then I'm taken back and the pop-up actually closes. And so the way that we were able to achieve this is by going into the list components. And here, what we did was we added a button. We called it detail. We apply a handler, and clicking on that handler, that would just go ahead and iterate over the items array, and then find that item that you selected based on the ID. And then we go ahead and pass that data to the set modal data. And so that set modal data is actually going to open this component, which is a brand new component. And here we're extracting the data that was passed in, and then we can go ahead and show the information. And we also added another handler. So that handler is just on the arrow. So clicking on that will actually do the toggling and actually close the pop-up. Then we also apply some CSS. So here we tweak the modal content, we added some classes. We use position absolute to make sure that this is going to cover the whole screen, and then that we have this white box in the center. And yeah, so we were able to find this really nice article on Medium, which we're going to post in the Slack. And it just has some really nice information about implementing pop-ups using React. And with that, we're open to questions and any feedback.
This is so good.
Awesome.
Great work. I love that you used percentages to like center it there in the middle. Like there are 100 ways that you can center something, but I think that if you're going to use like absolute the way that you all did, using percentages is wise because you don't have to deal with it looking funny when you get into different screen sizes.
Mhm.
Along with the translate that pulls it back. Because if you did 50%, the left edge of it would start at halfway across. So they transform it back 50% of the width of the block, which is really smart.
Yeah, it's a clever trick for sure. I don't think I've used it before, actually.
I mean, either. I'm married to Grid. Grid is my new spouse.
That's true. That's true. Like Flexbox and Grid. But yeah, transform translate is super handy.
Mm-hmm.
This is great. Good work. I haven't looked at that PR yet, so I don't have like lots of details, but it looks really good. So great work.
It sure does. All right. Well, that's it for the demos. Again, it was stellar.
Yeah.
Another
Nice work.
amazing
Well
round of demos.
They delivered again.
Good job. Okay. With that, I think that it's time for our special guest to present on accessibility. That's you.
All right, cool. Special guest.
You want me to introduce you like we're at like a conference or something? All right.
No,
Our next
no, I
speaker
don't
is
actually.
We want to know middle names. That's what we want to know.
What do you want to know?
Oh, middle names.
Oh, my middle name is Joseph.
There you go. Maybe you should introduce yourself just as Joseph.
Maybe we should call you Anjo.
Anyway, sorry.
Anjo.
The thing I like about the fact that my middle name is Joseph is that all three of my names are the same length.
Oh,
very nice.
Fun.
I guess. I mean, it's kind of
Nice.
That is very, very computery of you.
Yeah, right. The symmetry of it all. Anyway, nice job on the demos. I'm excited to kind of share some this learning module with you. It's one that's sort of near and dear to my heart. I've been paying attention to accessibility issues for about 20 years now. So it's always kind of a gift to be able to share this with people. And I don't know, actually I'd be interested to hear from the participants, especially what exposure you've had to web accessibility. Is this something that, like in your boot camps, did you talk about it? Have you done any kind of studying about accessibility yourselves?
I just started getting into it. I went to a conference. I can't remember which one because they're all online now. And so they kind of get jumbled up in my mind. But there was a really good talk that talked about accessibility. And so just keeping that in mind, I did it mostly with colors though. I didn't really do it with like anything else. It's just mostly like what colors are accessible for people because there's certain color combos that don't work well. But that's the most extent that I've had for it.
That's cool. Mabel, I saw that you started to unmute. Would you have something to add?
Yeah, so similar to Leanne, I did learn from a conference about accessibility and things like that. And then also I think Beyonce was hit with a lawsuit because she didn't have accessibility basically for the users of the site. And just from reading a lot about it, I know there's a really detailed guide that gives you a lot of tips of what you need to do to implement. But yeah, it's like, I feel like I don't know enough. So this is really helpful.
Okay. Fabrice or Leah, you have anything to add?
I don't really have that much exposure to accessibility at all, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah, me neither.
Okay, great. Well, that's perfect. Hopefully after we talk about the what, why, and how of it, you'll have at least enough information to kind of start learning it more on your own. So first thing is that you sometimes see, this is kind of a little aside almost, you'll see like hashtag A11Y. It's not ALLY actually. You'll see this on Twitter and stuff. And all that really means is that there are 11 letters between the A and the Y in the word accessibility. So this is actually a short way of writing accessibility. So when you see that hashtag, people aren't claiming to be an ally or something like that. It's actually about its accessibility. There, you'll see other ones like I18N, internationalization, L whatever N, L10N, I think, or something, localization. So yeah, so that's what that means if you see that around. So what is accessibility? So this is sort of the formal Wikipedia sort of definition, but web accessibility is the inclusive practice of ensuring that there are no barriers to prevent interaction with or access to websites on the World Wide Web, which I feel like nobody calls it that anymore, by people with physical disabilities, situational disabilities, which we'll talk about, and socioeconomic restrictions on bandwidth and speed. So I think a lot of us, when we think of accessibility, we think of, I'm blind, I need a screen reader, or I have maybe a physical impairment or something. But it's not just those things. There are other situations that are sort of covered by this. So when sites are correctly designed, developed, and edited, generally all users have equal access to information and functionality. So they may not experience the site exactly the same. If there's a detailed chart in the form of an image or something, a description of it is not exactly the same experience, but they have access to all the same information. That's sort of the goal. So the World Wide Web Consortium, that's what W3C stands for, they have a working group dedicated to web accessibility, the WCAG, and they publish standards about web accessibility. And in the United States, Section 508 of some law, I should really look it up, requires government agencies to make websites accessible to people with disabilities. You might see, I'm not actually ordering pizza later, but you might see that I have Domino's up here in the second tab, because even though Section 508 only covers government agencies, Domino's was actually sued recently for not having their website be accessible. So this is, it's taken a long time, but like the courts are finally kind of setting precedent that that private companies also need to make their websites accessible and can actually be sued if they don't. So anyway, so that's what it is. So it's really about trying to make sure that everyone has equal access to information on the web. Oh, the Rehabilitation Act, that's it. That's right. Thanks, Steve. So what? So accessibility, people with disabilities sometimes access websites using what's called assistive technologies. So screen readers is the ones we talk about a lot, but screen magnifiers is another one. And that's something that's built into Macs, and I'm sure Windows has an equivalent. Speech input. So instead of having to type, you can actually talk to the computer, and it's like actually kind of, everyone's like, yeah, nowadays everyone talks to their computer, of course, but it wasn't always the case. Assistive keyboards. So an example of that, there's actually a type of keyboard that is literally just a joystick, and people, they'll use their chin to move the joystick around and select things on the screen, move around on the screen. So that's, and then Braille displays. So there is software that will take a written page and turn it into Braille. There's little machines that you can put your fingers on and read the Braille. It'll change the Braille under your fingers, and you can read that way. So these are all ways that people access the web that you may not have ever even considered, but it's it makes things like the choice of whether to use a header or a paragraph or something like pretty important, right? So popular screen readers include NVDA and JAWS on Windows. NVDA is a free program. JAWS is quite expensive, but is also very good. And then VoiceOver, which is built into the Mac. So if you make your stuff usable via screen reader, it's going to be mostly accessible to most people. So something that we'll talk about again in the next few minutes is that this is all kind of on a spectrum. Like it's almost impossible to make something perfectly accessible to everybody. But what we do is we do all the things we know that we can, and that if you're in a company, all the things that sort of the project timeline and the budget allow to make it as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. And that's sort of what we're trying to do. So if you make it, if you can use it via a screen reader, it's probably going to be pretty good for most people. All right. So why do we do this? Why do we spend all this effort on this? So it is, I mean, at a kind of a high level, it's the right thing to do, to provide equitable access to information. Like I was saying before, you may be legally obligated to make your website accessible. You know, you're probably not going to get sued over your personal website, right? It's like, but you know, Domino's, a big corporation, millions of people use the site, and you know, it's important. I mean, people need their pizza. You know what I'm saying? So there are more people just in the United States who access websites with assistive technology than live in all of Canada. So it's not a small number of people, especially when you take into account, you know, like you think like, oh, the percentage of blind people or the percentage of whatever, but you put all those things together and pretty soon it's, you know, including situational stuff and all those things. It's a big number. Some people estimate 20% of people visiting your website have some sort of disability. Like I'm getting old, so my eyes aren't so good. You know what I mean? Like that's a form of disability. Like, you know, in 10 or 20 years, like I'm going to be bumping all those font sizes way up, right? So we're all headed there. So we should be kind to web users now. So yeah, and when you make your pages accessible for people with disabilities, it makes them more accessible for everyone. And a good example of that is if you can navigate through the whole page using your keyboard, that's very accessible. It means that a screen reader user is able to get to all the information. Whether or not they can read it all or it all makes sense is another question, but at least they can get through it all. But that also helps, you know, your power users, right? So there's some people, they get to know the website and they'll be tabbing and doing different things to get around the site without having to move over, touch their mouse. So it really does. It's like the curb cut thing on sidewalks, where originally those are put in because for people in wheelchairs, but almost everybody uses the curb cuts now. So it's the same kind of concept. So we talked about sort of the situational disabilities, and this is a chart that Microsoft put together. Microsoft has done some amazing work in the last few years in accessibility. Stacy mentioned Accessibility Insights in the chat, and we're going to actually use that tool to look at the Domino's site in a few minutes. But this is one thing that Microsoft put out about the difference between, you know, permanent, temporary, and situational disabilities. So, you know, you think about touch. You know, somebody may only have one arm; they may have been born that way or something. You may have an injury to one of your arms, so you're kind of in that same situation. Or you may be a parent and you're carrying a baby with one arm, so you only really have one arm to do everything else. And so, you know, there's examples of other you know, senses as well. But you know, it's the kind of thing where we all at different times fall into some of these categories, right? We've all been distracted while we're driving, or, you know, those kinds of things. So yeah, it's I feel like this chart's helpful for just expanding our conception of what is a disability, or what is something that may cause you to need an assistive technology when you're using technology. So yeah, so how do we do this? Hopefully you're all convinced now that you all understand what it is. You're all convinced why we should do it, and now we'll talk about how we do it. So the very first thing is to use valid semantic HTML. So that's the thing that's going to ensure that the structure, the gross structure of the page is, you know, makes sense to the screen reader software. So these, you know, your web browser knows how to kind of make almost anything look, you know, sort of correct, but a screen reader really relies on the structure of the page to give cues to the user about how to navigate around. So having that HTML be as descriptive of the content as possible is super important. I mean, a basic thing that like almost every tool will flag is that you need to have an alt attribute on all of your image tags. So the alt attribute doesn't have to have anything in it, but it needs to be there. So there are cases where you may have an image that is decorative, and it's not adding any sort of important content. You know, if the thing was being read and it's, you know, an icon next to a label, if the label is descriptive enough, you don't need to have anything in the alt attribute for the image itself. But if you leave it out, the screen reader is it's just going to say the word image where that thing was, and that's kind of distracting. It's like image. Oh, what am I missing? You know, I mean, it's not a good experience for the person. So so always have an alt attribute, but be smart about whether or not you have content in it. Use ARIA attributes if necessary. So this engineering manager at the New York Times says that the best ARIA is no ARIA at all. We need to use semantic HTML wherever possible. But so ARIA is a set of extensions. It's sort of like a bunch of attributes that you can add to HTML to give it extra information about what the thing is. So you could, using ARIA attributes, you could kind of recreate the semantics of semantic HTML by adding roles and different things that ARIA provides. But you're better off using semantic HTML and only using ARIA where you have to. So, you know, if you find yourself in a situation where there is no good semantic tag for the thing, then use ARIA attributes by all means. But avoid them. You know, try to do everything you can to avoid them. I mentioned this before, but ensuring all content is reachable by keyboard is sort of table stakes. It's like it's like a really good way to ensure that the page is generally accessible. So at Zapier, where I work, and Stacy is on my team, and Alejandro too. I was working with Alejandro on a project, and we brought in an accessibility tester from a company called Fable Labs, which I'll talk about, Fable Tech Labs, which I'll talk about in a minute. That person was, and he's blind. His name's Sam. He was using a screen reader to go through this page that we built, and he was tabbing through, and there was he skipped over something. It wasn't tabbable. He couldn't get to it. And we were asking about it, and he's like, I just can't even, like, he tried all the different ways he knows, and he's been using screen reader for a long, long time, and he couldn't get to that element. And so, his advice was just to go back and actually use a semantic tag for that thing that we had built. His thing was like, once the page, if I can reach everything by keyboard, then I can tell you whether or not it makes sense, whether it's a good experience. But if I can't get to it, it might as well not be there, right? So it's like this, sort of step one. Ensuring content and tab ordering makes sense. So content structure, like headings and lists and those kinds of things, as kind of creating a structure throughout the page is important. And then if you have, especially if you have a form, making sure that as you tab through, that the order of the form makes sense, not only visually, if you're tabbing through and sort of two things are side by side and you go left to right or something, but sort of linearly. So a screen reader is much more of a linear experience. If you tab, it's going to go sort of, it's almost like a list of things that it goes through. So, just making sure that stuff makes sense in that order as well. We mentioned earlier color contrast, so that's an important one. That's good for people with low vision, or also with the next one says don't only use color if color blindness too. Those are kind of related. Just making sure that there's enough contrast and that you're not only using color to signify state of something. So if there's like a stop and a go and you're just using red and green without any other label, that's not great. So someone with color blindness is going to see that as a couple of shades of gray, and that's not really helpful. A screen reader isn't going to know the difference between those two things. So that's a case where you might use a little text label or an icon that has good significance, and then also maybe an ARIA label or something on that to kind of make it really clear what those things mean. All right, that was a lot of information. So another part of the how is, how do you identify accessibility issues that need to be fixed? So there are a couple things, and this is sort of in order of, I'm not sure it's in order. It's an order of something. Anyway, a good place to start is with automated tools. So there's a tool called Axe, and it's actually built into Lighthouse, which you may have used in the developer tools in Chrome. But it goes through and does automated checks. So it does what's called static analysis of your site, and it can find all those things like a missing alt attribute or something like that. But so those tools are absolutely, they're essential. You should have them as part of a build process. Like you should have these things kind of checking everything. But they only find about 30% of the issues of the total universe of issues. And even if Axe tells you that it can tell you that you're missing an alt attribute, but it can't tell you what should be in the alt attribute, right? That's a very subjective thing that humans still have to do. Maybe not forever, but for now, humans have to kind of do that bit of the work. So, so the automator tools are good, and you should do them, but because they can kind of run in the background or just like surface information to you, but they're not sufficient by themselves. So the next level, I guess, is guided audit, which is what Accessibility Insights provides. So Accessibility Insights is a Chrome extension and Microsoft Edge extension that will walk you through, I don't know how many, it's like a dozen different things that you should pay attention to make sure your site is accessible. If you go through that entire audit, A, you're going to learn a whole bunch about accessibility, and B, your site's going to be in pretty good shape. So that's a really nice way to do that. But then the next level is to have actual accessibility testers test your site. So I mentioned Fable Tech Labs. They have a whole community of testers who, some use screen readers and some use screen magnifiers and some use, the keyboard, weird keyboards, not weird, but different keyboards and Braille readers and all these kinds of things. And you can actually ask them to have, I want a screen reader to look at these pages, but I also want somebody who's a Braille user or something. You can ask them for different types of testers, and they'll have actual people go through and create reports, and you can even get on calls with them and talk through the issues with their testers. It's there's nothing like it. It's the best way to make sure that stuff, like, you're really providing a great experience for people using assistive technology. I've been talking a lot. All right, so we're gonna do a little demo. Like I said, we're gonna use Accessibility Insights to look at the Domino's site. They got sued, so they should be in pretty good shape at this point. I mean, the thing that was kind of maddening about the lawsuit is that somebody estimated that it would cost them about 20 grand to fix the accessibility issues on their website. It sounds like a lot of money, but they probably spent 200 grand fighting the lawsuit. So why? Why even do that? Just fix the site. It's like the right thing to do. It's going to increase their sales because more people can access the website. I don't know. I don't get it. Anyway, but just as a little test bed for Accessibility Insights. So Accessibility Insights gives you sort of 3 ways that you can use the tool. We'll just do this fast pass to start. I think that's in another window. So let's see if I can put that in a tab. Okay, so I have these 2 tabs. So this is where the reporting happens. So the fast pass turned up 23 issues. They're all color contrast problems. So shoot, I should actually I'm gonna share this in a different way so you can see. I can have those 2 things side by side. So bear with me for a second while I do this. Find the advanced, so I can do a portion of the screen thing. All right, let's try this again. So I'm going to pull this out, because what Accessibility Insights will do is actually highlight parts of the screen, the page. So I click that and it jumps down. So you see that all these, all the violations are actually this section of legalese at the bottom of the page. So, not the end of the world, maybe, unless you really want to read all the legalese, but almost nobody does that. So this page is actually not in terrible shape. Most of it's pretty accessible, at least in terms of color contrast. But then let's move my Zoom windows around and look at tab stops. So this is kind of fun. So we're going to show tab stops. So it switches us back over, and I'm just going to hit the tab key. It's already focused down here, but it'll take you through wherever you're starting. It'll take you through and show you the order of what gets focused on when you tab through the page. So this is how you can sort of visually see whether or not the tabbing makes sense. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of cool anyway. But so that's sort of the fast pass. We're actually, let's run this on a different page though. So let me actually reload this because all that stuff's on there. So let's try to order something. So delivery, oh no, let's see. I don't want you to know my location. Let's say actually carry out back. All right. Maybe I will get a pizza. Just kidding. There's so many better pizza places here in Portland. All right, I actually don't really care about all this stuff. So I actually want to get to I want to order a pizza. All right, add items to this coupon. I don't even know what this is. Okay, this is, okay, all right. Okay, pizza's good. All right, so let's, first of all, let's see what this does. Okay, a bunch of color contrast things again. I think let's try to build a pizza. What is all that? All right. So, okay, rerun this, start over. Automated checks. All right, I'm gonna do this from here again. Automated checks. Automated checks. It can't be all correct, right? Let's do tab stops and see what happens. So, all right, so it starts, the first thing you're focused on is actually the X, which, the close X, which is not terrible, I guess. And then, oh no, that was the second thing. So we went from the title to the close X over to these options in this thing, change the quantity. I'm doing all this with the keyboard, so that's cool. So add to order. But actually what I want to do, so cheese and sauce.
How does it didn't let you tab down to like the size at all? Like if you go back.
But yeah, so let's go back.
Like if you want to choose your size and choose your crust. Oh, so like this is not great accessibility because they want you to add it to your order before you even choose your size or your crust.
Yeah, yeah. So unless there was some kind of cue that you that you're kind of skipping those steps, like, you know, if you'd used the site a bunch, you might know that, oh yeah, the order button's there if I just want to do this really quickly. Otherwise I need to set all these things. But, you know, if it was your first time on here, you'd be like, add to order. I mean, I don't want a 12-inch pizza. What do I do? Right.
Right.
So yeah, so that's a good point. So
it's like I was where it's like a catch might not do it, but if you're actual human using the site, you kind of have to use your like own brain to decide if this is a good experience or not.
Yeah, totally. Anyway, I mean, you kind of get the idea. The accessibility insights will, you know, it covers a whole bunch of things. So it does those automated checks. There's, you know, whether you can get things with keyboard, whether you can focus on everything. Landmarks is a pretty important thing. So with on-screen readers, landmarks are basically how an experienced screen reader user will navigate around. So you know, this tells you sort of what your landmarks are on the page and things. So it's a great extension. Absolutely install it and use it, and it will teach you a lot. So, oh wait, I was sharing the presentation too, wasn't I? All right, let me go back and do that. There's only one slide left, which is just some resources. So, but I'll show you that. So, we'll share the slides in the team channel afterwards. But you know, the web accessibility interest group, I think is what they're called. They have this intro to accessibility, which is a good overview. There's the actual guidelines, and then, you know, link to accessibility insights and their Microsoft's sort of inclusive design stuff. some lists of assistive technologies, acts, and then if you use Jest, which is a testing framework for React, there's a Jest acts, which kind of has that integrated. An article here, and then a link to Fable Text Labs, and then this one down here is kind of cool because I don't know how many of you may have attended Weston Thayer's Tech Talk on. He covered a bunch of stuff about screen readers and things. So Weston is a former Zapier person, but he founded this company called Assisted Labs, and so what he does is if you're on a Mac, you have VoiceOver built in. If you're on Windows, you could get NVDA, but those programs don't work exactly the same. And so it's a little bit like cross-browser incompatibilities and stuff. So he built this system that allows you to, you can go into a virtual machine running all of these different systems and test your stuff on the virtual machines. So similar to like Browser Stack or something, which is a way to test, if I needed to test something on an old Android phone or something, I could go to Browser Stack and pull up my site on there. It's similar to that, but with screen readers. Weston did the presentation for us, and he actually said he would make Assistive Labs available to all of our Collab Lab participants for free. It's actually a paid service, and he is letting us use it for free. So he's in Slack, and so you could actually just send him a DM if you want to try it out and to see how it works. So little plug for Weston there. And with that, I'm done. So are there any questions or anything about this? Did folks learn something?
I think I've seen a pressing question in the chat earlier when you were talking about the alt attribute on images. I think Scott was wondering about, if you have a background image, and I think, you can still define what is a background image. Like maybe is it through CSS or just a regular, styling applied to an image? Like, do you still need an alt attribute to it?
It's a really great question. I think it's probably very contextual. It's one of those "it depends" kind of answers, which are sort of annoying sometimes. But if you have a background image that's providing essential information, then you need to figure out some way to get that information across. So the element that has the background on it, maybe put an ARIA label that describes whatever that content is or something, and that might be one way to do it. A lot of times background images are decorative. So, for the app that you all are building with the oranges and stuff, you probably don't need to have that be read to somebody, right? But, Orange You Glad, he made a list. Anyway, I love that name. But yeah, so there may be cases where there is information in the background image. So you need to figure out some way. You could even have a sort of an invisible element or something that has the content in it or something like that. I don't know what the best way to do it is, but
cool.
It's a good question.
Yeah, it is. I don't know if there's other questions, but I had one, and this might be a trick question, so sorry.
All right.
But I've been working a lot in web-based 3D recently using something called 3JS. So I'm actually creating a 3D scene using Canvas. Is there any way to make that accessible? Like it's a 3D scene in a canvas. So is there a way to go about this, or is this like a blind spot of accessibility?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a super expert in that, but I've seen some people talking about that's it's something that needs to be addressed, like VR as an example. There are people that are thinking hard about how to make that accessible. But yeah, if you're in a canvas element and you are, I don't even know how you would do it. It's so visual a lot of the times that you could be trying to, you could have some element that is, you're feeding text that's describing what's going on, but that just seems, if it's a canvas element where you're doing free drawing or something, can you imagine even like trying to describe that? It would be really tough. So I don't know. That's a hard one. Weston might have a better answer. We could ping him in the Learning Together channel or something.
That'd be good.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'll ask him.
Okay, quick related career development plug as per usual. If you're wanting to get into open source, this is a really great place to start. Go find open source tools and run this accessibility check on them. And you can start one by one submitting PRs to knock out some of these accessibility issues that might be presented on their tools. This particular extension is really great as well because it tells you exactly what rules are being violated, exactly what, like the importance of them, how to fix them. So you can create like a really beautiful, informative PR from the information that the extension gives you, as well as fix the issue. So if you want to get into open source, this is a nice little foot in the door.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Anything else on this? If not, we will jump into going over our final week's issues. No?
And I guess I can also plug that. So I know Andrew has been talking about the talk by Western Fire, which I've linked in the chat. But also this week we have another talk that's coming up, and this one is about user experience. And we talked about Domino's Pizza's website, which provides a terrible user experience. So it might be a good question of like, okay, what is UX? What is user experience? So Michelle Williams will be talking about this. She'll be defining the concept for us and describing all the roles that go into, how to make the experience of the user the nicest as possible. So that
Dr. Michelle Williams, I might add.
Oh, Dr. Michelle Williams.
That's right. Yeah.
Again, another career development plug. This is a brilliant talk to come to because focusing on the user experience can be a real leg up in like a competitive pool of developers when you're interviewing. If you can talk about like why you're building for the users and to build good user experiences, it can show that you have empathy and you're a human and you care and you're thinking higher level than the code that you're writing. So come learn more about user experience.
Yeah, on Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time.
Yay! Okay, Andrew, I know you have other meetings, so if you want to pop off, you can. We're just going to go over our last week's issues.
Sure. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, you.
Yeah. Great job. Well done, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, on to you, Scott.
All right. Okay, so can everybody hear me first off?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah.
So our tickets this week are, as a user, I want the shopping list screen to look pretty so the app looks professional and welcoming. And here's a quick guide as to what that might look like. Obviously, we're already going in a different direction, but it's just sort of the elements you might want to keep in mind. Not a whole lot more to say about that. Anybody else have any questions? No? All right, moving on to 16. We've got, as a user, I want the item detail screen to look pretty. And the way that might look is this. Again, we've got the modal, so that might present some other challenges. Everybody's still there, having weird technical issues.
No worries.
All right, so number 17. As a user, I want the add an item screen to look pretty. And let's see. So add an item screen. The screen a user uses to add a new item to the screen looks something like the following. And again, it's more just a matter of like what elements you might be looking at, making sure you have them all. And we've pretty much got all that down. So any questions about any of that? Thoughts?
There have been like so many different ways these last few issues have been tackled. And what I feel like, and Scott, I think your group did this, right? Where you just kind of like mobbed on the entire thing.
Yeah.
That is like a beautiful collaborative way to sort of like wrap up this project. And so I'll leave it to you all to decide what you want to do, but do know that it's an option if instead of, picking a ticket to take, if you all just kind of want to get together and work on this all as a full group, work off like one branch, like I'll let you organize it however you want, but there's a lot of room for creativity here. The wireframes are there if you like need a guide, but I think you all have like a brilliant eye for design already. So use your imagination, use your creativity. Any thoughts on how you want to tackle it? Do you want to just pick issues, or do you want to go at it together?
I think that it would be helpful if we each take an issue, but before we start coding, have one meeting together to finalize like what everything is gonna look like.
I love that idea.
Yeah, I agree with
Cool.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a really smart thing to do as well. I think just each of us tackling a CSS issue, but before then, just getting together and just making sure everything looks good.
I love it. Any takers on any of these? Anybody want to snag one in particular? Or if you don't really care, Scott can just kind of dole them out. Also, there's like 3, so maybe Scott like assign the first 2, and then whoever finishes first can just snag that last one. By the time you get to the last one, there will be so much styling in place that you'll just kind of like pop that same styling onto that last one. So shouldn't be too rough. Guys might also work off the same branch, because then like you can always make sure like you're not dealing with a bunch of merge conflicts in the end if you keep like pulling down the other team's code. But it's up to you. You can do it however you want.
So should I just be assigning one person to each of these, and then, or?
Just assign the first pair to the first one, second pair to the second one, and then later on in the week,
Got it.
Somebody can grab the last one.
I need to remind myself these on pairs here.
Yeah, I love your idea of like getting together first, like before you write any code, like get together and come up with a plan first, so you don't have to like backtrack and then do a lot of work.
And a good way to do that too can also be like documentation. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I drove the big D, but like you can definitely like create some sort of documentation of here's our style guidelines, and so from there you can build it. And
totally, you're totally right. And you all kind of already started creating like a little style guide in your commented code, so totally like pull that out into the README, refine it. Do whatever you need to do to kind of like stay on the same page and create like a really cohesive style. Any final questions about these ones, or like going into the last week?
I know, right? That's crazy. It went so fast.
It really did. No? Okay, well with that, I see a bunch of new friends on this meeting. I know you're coming in for the next meeting, so thanks for hanging in there. With that, we will say our goodbyes to TCL 9 for now. We will be having office hours later in the week. Is it me or is it Scott?
I think it's Scott, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm doing office hours, so we'll do that Thursday, and yeah, I'll probably just be around all day, so we'll figure out when everybody's ready. And
the rest of us will be around as well if you have questions, so please let us know, and we are excited to see what you build this week. Any final thoughts? It's going to be like a weird goodbye because we're not actually going anywhere, so you have to hang up on us this time. But it's good to see you all, and great work this week. Let us know if you need help on Slack. Bye, everyone.